It sure looks as if Michael Vick is going to be named the head coach at Norfolk State, an FCS program in Virginia. It's an HBCU. And at the time of this recording, it's like he's finalizing the deal. There was a time yesterday where he was talking to Sacramento State and Norfolk State, but he's going to take the Norfolk State job, which makes sense. He's from the Tidewater area, and so it tracks that he would want to be a coach in that area at an HBCU. All that makes sense. And I actually like the hire. I think it makes a lot of sense. I have always had some admiration for people who can admit when they're not in an advantageous situation or they're not in position to be successful doing things the way everybody else does them, right? Like, I like when coaches coming into a game will change their game plan and just say, like, hey, we can't do the things we want to do against this team, so we have to get different. We have to get creative. And I think Norfolk State, as a job, like in the hierarchy of college football, a Division I football, in FCS football, in HBCU football, is not ever going to probably be at the top of anybody's list that is an established, up-and-coming, well-sought-after, well-regarded coach. Now, that's not to talk down or say, speak negatively of coaches who have coached there in the past, because they have been a pretty good program at times. But for recruiting, for basically everything that you need to succeed in the college football landscape in 2024, Norfolk State is going to be a step behind a lot of its competitors. And so you have to go out and do something different. You have to go out and go against the grain, be unconventional. And so hiring somebody like Michael Vick is an interesting hire. It continues the former highly regarded player coming to an HBCU pipeline that we have seen. Deion Sanders obviously kind of started it when he went to Jackson State. Eddie George is at Tennessee State and has done a really good job thus far. And so Michael Vick, Bethune-Cookman had hired Ed Reed for a hot minute before they decided that was a bad idea, because he had the audacity to say that their facility sucked when their facility sucked. But Michael Vick to Norfolk State is just the latest in that line. And so when you've seen the success that other places have had, other coaches that have kind of just jumped into the college football game and been successful, why not think that it's going to be the same with our program? And so I understand the hire completely, unequivocally. It makes sense. Michael Vick is from the area. He's going to have name cachet with the recruits, because, and that's one of the things that I think is somewhat interesting with Deion Sanders, is that the players today know Deion Sanders as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, cornerback of all time. But I don't think any of them watched him play. With Michael Vick, and especially with Eddie George, you didn't watch him play. Ed Reed, yes. There was talk earlier this year that Ray Lewis was in the running for a college head football coaching job. It didn't work out. But recruits today watched Ray Lewis play. Recruits today watch Michael Vick play. And so when you can look at, when you're familiar, one, with the guy's body of work as a college football player, as an NFL player, rather than just like, my dad says you were real good, that brings a little bit extra fame, attention, notoriety. And Michael Vick wants to meet with a recruit, it's going to be a big deal. So I can't ever fault. And I know that there is a portion of the college football fandom, or especially like in coaching circles, who these kind of hires piss them off, right? Because Michael Vick didn't start his career as a graduate assistant and work his way up, become a position coach, become a coordinator. He got a head coaching job because he's Michael freaking Vick. Deion Sanders got a head coaching job because he's Deion Sanders. Eddie George got a head coaching job because he's Eddie George. And is that a privilege? Yeah, it is. Of course it is. The chances that there is no coach that's in Division II, Division III, that's a coordinator or a head coach at the FCS level or whatever that's not a better football coach than Deion Sanders is really slim. The idea that he got that job on merit, strictly on merit, is insane. Because as a football coach, there are hundreds, probably thousands of people who are more qualified to lead the Colorado football program. But he got that job because he's Deion freaking Sanders, and he's found a way to be successful. In 2 years, they go from being an absolute doormat, afterthought, etc., to having the Heisman Trophy winner, winning 10 games, and they're going to play in the most interesting non-college football playoff bowl game. So I'm not knocking the hire. I'm just pointing out that, like, hey, you only got this because of who you are. This is not the only avenue that this happens, by the way. The idea that Deion Sanders is some, like, unicorn who burst onto the scene and got this high-profile job because of his name and who he knows is not only applicable to college football. And the same can be said for Michael Vick. Michael Vick gets the Norfolk State job because he's Michael freaking Vick. And so far, and I don't know how I feel about this yet, there hasn't been a whole lot of, like, Michael Vick. And I think that's probably a good thing. Either it's one of two things. Because does Michael Vick have a checkered past? Does Michael Vick have things in his past that could make you say, should this guy be a college head football coach? Absolutely he does. Undeniably he does. But we haven't really seen that yet. And I don't know if it's we haven't seen that yet or we're not going to see it. But it's either one of kind of two things. People have recognized that, like, hey, he did his time and has said, like, I didn't know what I was doing was all that wrong, but now I do, and I understand that. That's my bad. Or people just forget. It's been long enough that it's not at the top of your mind anymore. And I don't know which one it is. But either way, I think it's probably a good thing that hasn't been the initial reaction, that it wasn't immediately Michael Vick has a checkered past in a couple of different areas, to tell you the truth. That wasn't the first thing that came up. Gives me some encouragement. Like, maybe we're kind of moving past all of that. Because in some aspects, some people don't deserve a second chance, right? And I think we can agree on that. But then there's this opportunity, I think, where Michael Vick has said, it's just, I didn't really know what, it's essentially kind of like, if nobody ever taught you something was wrong, you're not going to know that was wrong. And he's paid his debt to society. He paid his dues. It certainly appears as if he is a changed person from that incident, from those incidences, from that situation in his life. I don't even know what the best phrase to use is there. And now he's to a point where he wants to be a college football coach. And I think be a college football coach for the right reasons, because he left a gig at Fox Sports as an NFL analyst to become the offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Legends in the Alliance for American Football League. And his reasoning then was, I got to talking about, I never thought I wanted to be a coach, but I got to talking about football, and it made me really excited, but then I wasn't affecting anybody's lives. I wasn't making anybody's life better by talking about football at Fox Sports. And so I wanted to be in a situation where I was having an impact on people. And so when that's kind of the motivation for why you want to get into sport, because I think there are motivations for, at the college level, I think there's kind of 4 motivations for why you get into coaching. You love the sport, you love kids, you love the power, or you love the money. And if Michael Vick says, like his primary interest in getting into coaching was because he likes people, I think you're more well set up to be successful if that's what motivates you. If that's the reason you get out of bed every morning to go do your job is because you like being a good influence on people. And you can tell people, hey, here's what you shouldn't do, and you should listen to me because I am the poster child of what you should not have done. I am the guy that people will point to as what might have been, if not for my bad mistakes. And so he can have that good impact on college-age kids. And I think when that's your motivating factor, I think Mike Vick is probably set up to be successful at Norfolk State. And whether that leads to eventually being somewhat like Deion Sanders, where you're at the FBS level and you're having great success, and kids from the transfer portal or kids out of high school want to come play for you because you're Michael freaking Vick. I don't know. But on the surface, to me, it looks like a good hire. And I think it's one of those situations that, one, I think is undeniably a good thing, right? If former professional football players want to be in a situation where they want to give back to HBCUs, I think that's a good thing. And then if they can also become really good football coaches in the process, what's the downside? I don't know that there is one. So I wish Michael Vick the best of luck. I hope he's really successful in Norfolk State, and I hope they turn into, another Jackson State type program where all we can do is pay attention to them because of how well things are going. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.